The sound of the classroom door slamming shut echoed through the empty hallway like a gunshot, and Jasmine Washington found herself trapped with 3 boys who had been making her life hell for the past 2 weeks. Trevor Bennett's cruel smile spread across his face as he twisted the lock, his football jersey stretching across his broad shoulders, while his friends Marcus and Dylan flanked him like predators cornering prey. What they didn't know was that the quiet black girl they'd been tormenting wasn't just new to Jefferson High School, she was new to holding back, and the trembling they mistook for fear was actually her struggling to contain something they weren't prepared for. Jasmine had arrived at Jefferson High exactly 14 days ago, on a rainy Monday morning that seemed to set the tone for everything that followed. Her mother had taken a job as a night shift nurse at the local hospital after her father's sudden death from a heart attack left them drowning in medical bills. They'd moved from Chicago to this small Indiana town where rent was cheaper, and her mother's sister could help watch Jasmine's younger brother while she worked. The transition from a diverse urban school to Jefferson High, where she was one of only 12 black students in a school of 800, felt like stepping into another world, a world where she stuck out like a sore thumb and became an easy target for those looking to assert their dominance. Trevor Bennett ruled Jefferson High with the kind of casual cruelty that came from never facing consequences. His father owned the largest car dealership in town and sponsored the football team, which made Trevor untouchable in the eyes of the administration. At 6 feet 2 inches tall, with sandy blonde hair and blue eyes that could turn from charming to cold in an instant, he was the kind of all-American boy that teachers loved and parents trusted, but Jasmine had seen through his facade from day one when he accidentally knocked her books out of her hands in the hallway and laughed when she had to scramble to pick them up while other students walked around her. The harassment had started, small whispered comments about her hair when she wore it natural, jokes about her ghetto lunch when she brought leftover soul food her mother had cooked, and questions about whether she was there on some kind of diversity scholarship. Jasmine had tried to ignore it, keeping her head down and focusing on her studies. She was determined to get into a good college with a full scholarship so she could help her family climb out of the financial hole they were in, but Trevor seemed to take her silence as weakness, and his attacks had grown bolder with each passing day. It was now 3:45 on a Friday afternoon, and the school was nearly empty. Jasmine had stayed late to use the library computers since they didn't have internet at home yet, and she needed to finish her history paper. She'd been walking to her locker to grab her jacket when Trevor appeared with Marcus and Dylan. They'd herded her into the empty chemistry classroom at the end of the hall, and now she stood with her back against the whiteboard, her backpack clutched against her chest. "You've been avoiding us, Jasmine," Trevor said, his voice dripping with false concern. "That's not very friendly. We just want to get to know the new girl better." Marcus, a stocky wrestler with acne scars and mean eyes, chuckled from his position by the door. "Yeah, we're the welcoming committee." Dylan, tall and lanky with greasy hair that hung in his eyes, moved to block the windows that faced the courtyard. "No one can see in here after school. Teacher's lounge is on the other side of the building." Jasmine's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "I need to go. My mom's expecting me." "Your mom's working the night shift at the hospital," Trevor said, and Jasmine's blood ran cold. "How did he know that?" "My dad golfs with the hospital administrator." Amazing what you can learn in a small town. He took a step closer, and Jasmine could smell his cologne mixed with the lingering scent of football practice sweat. "See? I've been thinking. You come here, acting all quiet and studious, thinking you're better than us. But you're not. You're just another." "Don't!" Jasmine interrupted, her voice sharp. "Don't say it!" Trevor's eyes flashed with anger at being interrupted. "Or what? You'll report me? Go ahead. My dad owns half this town. Who do you think they'll believe? The star quarterback whose family's been here for 4 generations? Or some girl who just showed up?" Marcus laughed again, a harsh sound that bounced off the walls. "She probably doesn't even know how things work in a place like this. Big city girl thinking she can just come here and act however she wants. Maybe we need to teach her," Dylan suggested, cracking his knuckles. "Show her how we do things at Jefferson." Jasmine's grip on her backpack tightened. Inside, she felt something shift, not fear, but something else, something she'd been keeping locked away since the incident at her old school. The incident that was part of the reason they'd had to move, though she'd never told her mother the whole truth. "You know what your problem is?" Trevor continued, moving even closer. "You don't know your place. In Chicago. Maybe you could blend in, be just another face in the crowd. But here you stand out, and not in a good way. The sooner you understand that, the easier your life will be." "My place?" Jasmine repeated, her voice quiet but with an edge that made Dylan shift uncomfortably. "That's right," Trevor said, mistaking her quiet tone for submission. "Your place is keeping your head down, staying out of our way, and being grateful we even let you attend our school. This isn't some inner-city dump where anything goes. We have standards here." Jasmine let out a short laugh, surprising all three boys. "Standards? Is that what you call cornering a girl in an empty classroom? Is that what passes for standards in your precious little town?" Trevor's face flushed red. No one talked back to him, especially not someone he considered beneath him. "You think you're funny, Marcus? Show her how funny we find." "What?" Jasmine said, holding up one hand while the other reached into her backpack. "Before you do something you'll regret. There's something you should know about me, something I haven't told anyone since I got here." The three boys paused, curiosity temporarily overriding their aggression. Trevor crossed his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. "What? You're going to tell us your dad's a lawyer? Going to sue us? Newsflash, me family has the best lawyers in the state." "No," Jasmine said, pulling out her phone. "My dad's dead. Remember? You made fun of me for not having lunch money last week because of it." She swiped through her phone with steady fingers, though her heart was racing. "But he did leave me something. A particular set of skills, you might say." Marcus snorted. "What? Did he teach you karate or something? This isn't a movie." "Girl." "Not karate," Jasmine said, finding what she was looking for on her phone, something much more useful in the 21st century. She held up her phone, showing a recording app that was clearly running. The timer showed it had been recording for the past 7 minutes. "Everything you just said, every threat, every racist implication, every admission that your father's influence protects you from consequences, all recorded." The color drained from Trevor's face. You can't record us without permission. That's illegal." "Actually," Jasmine said, her voice gaining confidence, "Indiana is a one-party consent state. I can record any conversation I'm part of. My dad was a civil rights attorney before he died. He made sure I knew my rights." Dylan started moving toward her. "Give us the phone." "Stop right there," Jasmine commanded, and something in her voice made him freeze. "This is uploading to the cloud in real time. Even if you take my phone, the recording's already saved." But that's not the best part. She swiped to another app. "See this? It's a safety app my mom made me install. The moment you locked that door, I activated it. It's been live streaming everything to a security company. And if I don't deactivate it in the next 3 minutes, they automatically call the police and send them my exact location." "She's bluffing," Marcus said, but his voice wavered. "Amy?" Jasmine asked. "Do you really want to take that chance? Assault charges don't look good on college applications, even for star quarterbacks with rich daddies." Trevor's hands clenched into fists. "You think you're so smart? You have no idea who you're messing with. My family? Your family's money won't mean anything when this goes viral." Jasmine interrupted. "Oh, didn't I mention? The recording's also being streamed to my cousin's Instagram. She has 40,000 followers, mostly from her social justice content. She's always looking for stories about small-town racism and corruption. Imagine how this will play out. 3 white boys corner black girl in empty classroom, threaten her while bragging about their privilege and immunity from consequences. How do you think that's going to go over?" The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Jasmine could see the wheels turning in Trevor's head as he calculated his options. She pressed her advantage. "But I'm not unreasonable," she continued. "I know how things work in small towns. You're right about that. Your family has influence, and making enemies won't make my life easier. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to unlock that door. And we're all going to walk out of here. You're going to stop harassing me. Stop making comments about my hair, my food, my family's financial situation. You're going to treat me with the same respect you show to Madison Parker or any other girl in this school whose daddy belongs to your country club. And if we don't? Trevor asked. Though his bravado was clearly cracking, then I release everything, Jasmine said simply, not just to social media, but to the school board, the local news, the State Athletic Association. Did you know that bullying and racial harassment can get you banned from playing high school sports? No more football scholarship for you. No more being the big man on campus. Just another privileged kid who thought he was untouchable until he wasn't. Marcus was already backing away from the door. Trevor, man, maybe we should. Shut up, Trevor snapped. But Jasmine could see the fear in his eyes now. The predator had become prey, and he didn't know how to handle it. 2 minutes until the safety app alerts the police. Jasmine said, checking her phone. What's it going to be? Dylan was the first to break. This is crazy. Man, I'm out. He moved away from the windows, hands raised. I didn't even want to do this. It was all Trevor's idea. Some friend you are? Trevor snarled. But Dylan was already heading for the door. 1 minute 45 seconds. Jasmine announced, Marcus, you're 18, right? That means you'd be charged as an adult? How's that going to look when you apply for jobs after graduation? Marcus fumbled with the door lock, his thick fingers suddenly clumsy. This is messed up. You didn't tell us she was recording everything. Because I didn't know, Trevor shouted, his carefully maintained cool finally shattering w.ls preeny.z. How was I supposed to know she was some kind of what? Jasmine challenged. Smart? Prepared? Not the easy target you thought I was? The lock finally clicked open, and Marcus practically fell over himself, getting out of the room. Dylan followed immediately, leaving Trevor alone with Jasmine. For a moment, they stood there, predator and prey positions completely reversed. This isn't over, Trevor said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, it is, Jasmine replied firmly. Because if you or your friends come near me again, if you so much as look at me wrong, I won't just release the recording, I'll also share the screenshots I have of your Instagram DMs to Brittany Chen, where you called her those horrible names after she turned you down for homecoming, and the photos Marcus sent to my friend Aisha back in Chicago when he found her Facebook. Yeah, she forwarded those to me. We look out for each other. Trevor's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. How did you— 1 minute, Jasmine said, cutting him off. Leave now. Or explain to the police why you locked a female student in a classroom after hours. Trevor turned and fled, his expensive sneakers squeaking against the linoleum floor. Jasmine waited until she heard their footsteps fade completely before deactivating the safety app. Her hands shook as she gathered her things, the adrenaline finally catching up with her. She walked out of the classroom on unsteady legs, making it to the girls' bathroom before the tears came. They weren't tears of fear or sadness, but of relief and released tension. She'd stood up to them. She'd used her brain instead of her fists, unlike at her old school, where she'd gotten into a physical altercation that had resulted in a suspension, even though she'd been defending herself. As she splashed cold water on her face, Jasmine thought about her father. He would have been proud of how she'd handled the situation, using the law and technology as her weapons instead of violence. Always be prepared. Baby girl, he used to say. Knowledge and preparation are the greatest equalizers. She dried her face with a paper towel and looked at herself in the mirror. Her natural hair formed a halo around her face, and her dark eyes looked back with a strength she'd almost forgotten she possessed. Coming to Jefferson High had felt like a punishment, a step backward. But maybe it was an opportunity to be someone different than she'd been in Chicago, where she'd let anger control her responses to disrespect. The hallway was completely empty now as she made her way to her locker. The setting sun cast long shadows through the windows, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. She grabbed her jacket and headed for the exit, her footsteps echoing in the silence. As she pushed open the heavy front doors, she nearly collided with someone coming in. It was Victoria Chen, the editor of the school newspaper and Brittany's older sister. Victoria was known for her investigative pieces that sometimes ruffled feathers in the administration. "Jasmine," Victoria said, steadying herself. "I was looking for you. My sister told me Trevor's been giving you a hard time." Yasmin hesitated, then made a decision. "Actually, I have something you might be interested in. A story about bullying and privilege at Jefferson High." Victoria's eyes lit up with interest. "Really? Do you have evidence?" Jasmine smiled, thinking of the recording on her phone. "Oh, I have evidence, but I need to know that if I share this with you, it'll be handled right. This isn't just about mates, about making sure no one else has to go through what I did." "Absolutely," Victoria said, her expression serious. "We've been trying to expose the culture of bullying here for months, but no one's been willing to go on record. Too scared of retaliation." "Well," Jasmine said, "I'm not scared anymore, but I want to do this smart prime. Can we meet tomorrow at the coffee shop on Main Street? Somewhere public. With witnesses?" Victoria nodded eagerly. 10 o'clock? I'll bring my recording equipment, and we can do a proper interview." As they parted ways, Jasmine felt a surge of something she hadn't experienced in months. Maybe she couldn't change the whole culture of Jefferson High overnight, but she could start something. She could be the pebble that started the avalanche. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Working late again tonight? Baby, there's leftover gumbo in the fridge. Love you." Jasmine smiled and typed back, "Love you too. Mom, had an interesting day. Tell you about it tomorrow." She pocketed her phone and started the walk home, her steps lighter than they'd been in weeks. The autumn air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of falling leaves and distant bonfires. As she passed the football field, she could see the team practicing under the lights. Trevor was there, throwing passes, but even from a distance, she could see his movements were off, his usual confidence shaken. Good, she thought. Let him wonder what she was going to do next. Let him feel what it was like to be powerless, to have someone else control your fate. She wouldn't release the recording knot unless he forced her hand, but he didn't need to know that. The threat would be enough to keep him in line. And Victoria's article would put the whole school on notice that bullying wouldn't be tolerated anymore. As she turned onto her street, Jasmine reflected on how different this confrontation had been from the one at her old school. There, she'd let someone push her buttons until she'd snapped and thrown a punch, breaking the girl's nose. It had felt good in the moment, but the aftermath of suspension, the disappointment in her parents' eyes, the lawyer fees they couldn't afford had taught her that violence wasn't the answer. Her father had sat her down after that incident and talked to her about strategic thinking. "Baby girl," he'd said, "the system isn't always fair, especially for people who look like us. That's why we have to be smarter. We have to think 3 steps ahead, document everything, know your rights, use their own rules against them. That's how we win it with our fists." But with our minds, she'd carried that lesson with her to Jefferson High, even when the grief of losing him made her want to lash out at the world. And today, she'd finally put it into practice. She'd turned the tables on Trevor Bennett without throwing a single punch, using nothing but preparation, technology, and the bullies' own arrogance against them. Her small rental house came into view, the porch light on even though no one was home. Her mother always left it on, a beacon welcoming them back, no matter how late she worked. Jasmine climbed the creaky steps and unlocked the door. Stepping into the familiar warmth of home, her little brother's backpack was on the couch, which meant he was at their aunt's house doing homework. Good. She didn't want him to worry about what had happened today. At 10 years old, Malik had enough to deal with, adjusting to a new school and missing their father. Jasmine heated up the gumbo and sat at their small kitchen table, finally allowing herself to process everything that had happened. The fear she'd felt when that door locked, the surge of power when she'd revealed the recording, the look on Trevor's face when he realized his privilege couldn't protect him from consequences. But most of all, she thought about what came next. The interview with Victoria. The article that would expose the toxic culture at Jefferson High, the inevitable backlash from Trevor and his friends, their families, maybe even some teachers who preferred to maintain the status quo. She was ready for it all. Because she'd learned something important today, she didn't have to face it alone. There was Victoria, ready to give her a platform. There was Aisha back in Chicago, who'd immediately forwarded those inappropriate messages when Jasmine had asked for help building a case. There was her mother, who worked herself to the bone but would go to war for her children if needed. And there was her father's voice in her head, reminding her to document everything, know her rights, and think strategically. He might be gone, but his lessons lived on, giving her the tools she needed to fight battles he'd never imagined she'd face. As she washed her dishes, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged her on Instagram. She opened the app cautiously, worried it might be retaliation already beginning. But instead, she found a post from a girl named Keisha, a sophomore she'd barely spoken to. Saw what happened with TB and his goons today? The post read, "About time someone stood up to them. You're not alone at Jasmine W. Number Jefferson High Justice." The post already had dozens of likes and comments. As Jasmine scrolled through them, she realized word had already spread. Marcus or Dylan must have talked, or maybe someone had overheard her conversation with Victoria. Either way, the secret was out. Someone had finally challenged Trevor Bennett and won. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification, then another. More students sharing Keisha's post, adding their own stories of harassment and bullying. A junior named Alex wrote about how Marcus had stolen his lunch money for months. A freshman girl described how Dylan had spread rumors about her when she refused to do his homework. And then, surprisingly, a message from Madison Parker, the blonde cheerleader whose father actually did belong to Trevor's country club. "Hey, I know we haven't really talked, but I wanted you to know I'm glad someone finally stood up to Trevor. He's been getting away with this stuff for too long. If you need support when the article comes out, I've got your back." Jasmine stared at the message in shock. Madison Parker, offering support? She'd always assumed the popular kids were all on Trevor's side, but maybe that was just another assumption she needed to challenge. She typed back, "Thank you, that means a lot. Maybe we could talk sometime?" The response came immediately. "Coffee tomorrow after your interview? I have some stories of my own that Victoria might want to hear." As more messages poured in, Jasmine realized something had shifted. By standing up to Trevor, she'd given others permission to do the same. The recording on her phone wasn't just evidence of one incident, it was a catalyst for change. She thought about her father again, about how he dedicated his life to fighting injustice through the legal system. He'd always told her that real change happened when people stood together, when one brave voice inspired others to speak up. She'd never imagined she'd be that voice, especially not in a small Indiana town where she felt like an outsider, but maybe that was exactly why it had to be her. As an outsider, she could see the toxic dynamics that those who'd grown up in the system had learned to accept. She didn't have years of conditioning telling her that Trevor Bennett was untouchable. She just saw a bully who needed to be stopped. Her phone was still buzzing with notifications when her mother finally came home after 11. Jasmine heard her key in the lock and met her at the door. "Baby, why are you still up?" her mother asked, looking exhausted in her scrubs. "Mom, sit down," Jasmine said, guiding her to the couch. "I need to tell you what happened today." She told her everything: the cornered classroom, the recording, the threats to release it, Victoria's article, and the growing movement online. Her mother's face went through a series of emotions: fear, anger, pride, and finally, concern. "Are you okay?" she asked, pulling Jasmine into a hug. "Really okay?" "I am," Jasmine said, surprised to find it was true. "I handled it like Dad would have wanted. Smart, not violent. And Mom, I think we're going to change things here. Really change them." Her mother held her tighter. "Your father would be so proud." "I'm so proud. But baby, you know there might be consequences. These small towns, when you challenge the power structure." "I know," Jasmine said, "but I can't just keep my head down and take it. Not anymore. And I'm not alone. There are others ready to speak up. We just needed someone to go first." They sat together on the couch for a long time, her mother stroking her hair the way she had when Jasmine was little. Finally, her mother spoke again. "You know what your grandmother used to say? Sometimes God puts you exactly where you need to be, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time. Maybe us ending up in this town wasn't just about cheaper rent. Maybe you were meant to be here, to be the change these kids needed." Jasmine thought about that as she finally headed to bed. Her room was small, with boxes still unpacked in the corner, but it felt different tonight. Less like a prison and more like a launching pad. She checked her phone one last time before sleep. The Instagram post now had over 200 likes and dozens of comments. Students from Jefferson High were organizing, planning to accompany her to the interview tomorrow as a show of support. Someone had even created a hashtag, #JeffersonStandsUp, but it was the last message that made her smile. It was from an unknown number, but she recognized the writing style immediately. It was Aisha, her best friend from Chicago. "Heard through the grapevine that you're raising hell in Indiana? That's my girl. Remember what we always said, they can't break what they can't bend. Stay strong, stay smart, and call me if you need backup. Chicago's got your back." Jasmine plugged in her phone and lay down, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Trevor wouldn't give up easily. His father would probably try to use his influence to kill the story. There might be retaliation, subtle or otherwise. But tonight, she'd won. She'd faced down 3 bullies in an empty classroom and emerged victorious, not through violence, but through intelligence and preparation. She'd sparked something in her classmates, a recognition that they didn't have to accept the status quo. Most importantly, she'd found her voice again, not the angry, to reactive voice that had gotten her in trouble in Chicago, but a strong, strategic voice that could actually create change. As sleep finally claimed her, Jasmine's last thought was of her father. She could almost hear his voice, warm with approval. "That's my baby girl. That's how we do it. Smart, strong, and always 3 steps ahead." Tomorrow would bring the next phase of the battle. Victoria's article would blow everything wide open. The administration would have to respond. Parents would get involved. It would be messy and complicated and probably exhausting. But Jasmine Washington was ready. She'd been tested in that empty classroom and hadn't broken. Now it was time to show Jefferson High what happened when they underestimated the quiet black girl who just wanted to be left alone to pursue her education. They'd made a fatal error trapping her in that room. They'd awakened something they weren't prepared for, not just in her, but in every student who'd been bullied, harassed, or made to feel less than. The revolution at Jefferson High had begun, and it had started with 3 boys who thought they could intimidate the wrong girl. As the clock struck midnight, marking the end of one day and the beginning of another, change was already spreading through the halls of Jefferson High like wildfire, and at the center of it all was Jasmine Washington, who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't throwing a punch, it's throwing light on the darkness and watching the cockroaches scatter. The next morning arrived with unexpected drama when Jasmine's phone erupted with notifications at 6:30. She groggily reached for it, expecting more supportive messages from classmates, but instead found dozens of missed calls from Victoria Chen. Her heart sank as she read the latest text. "Urgent! They're trying to shut us down. Meet me at the coffee shop now." Jasmine threw on clothes and rushed out, her mother calling after her in confusion. The walk to Main Street usually took 15 minutes, but she made it in 10, her breath forming clouds in the crisp morning air. The coffee shop was just opening, and Victoria was already there, pacing outside with her laptop bag clutched to her chest. "They know," Victoria said without preamble. "Someone leaked that we're doing the article. My advisor got a call from the superintendent at 5 this morning, strongly suggesting we reconsider running any story about bullying at Jefferson High." Jasmine felt her stomach drop. Can they do that? Stop the school paper from publishing? Technically, no. We have First Amendment protections, but they can make our lives miserable. pull funding, shut down the paper altogether if they claim we're being disruptive to the educational environment. Victoria's usual composure was cracking. Trevor's dad already called my parents, offered to sponsor my college applications if I killed the story. They went inside, ordering coffee with shaking hands. The elderly owner, Mrs. Patterson, gave them a knowing look but said nothing, just handed them their drinks with an extra chocolate croissant. On the house. "So what do we do?" Jasmine asked, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Victoria pulled out her laptop. "We don't just publish in the school paper. We go bigger. I have a cousin who works for the Indianapolis Star. If we can't tell this story locally, we tell it regionally. Make it impossible to suppress." "But the recording is our ace in the hole," Victoria interrupted. "I've already uploaded it to multiple cloud services. Even if they confiscate our phones, the evidence is safe." "But Jasmine, I need to know you're ready for this. Once we go wide, there's no taking it back. Your name will be out there. Your story." Jasmine thought about her mother, working double shifts to keep them afloat. About Malik, trying to fit in at his new school. About all the reasons she had to keep her head down and stay quiet. Then she thought about Keisha's post, about Madison's unexpected support, about all the students who'd been suffering in silence. "Do it," she said firmly. "But first, let me call my mom. She deserves to hear this from me." The conversation with her mother was difficult, but necessary. There was fear in her voice, but also fierce pride. "You're your father's daughter," she said finally. "He never backed down from a righteous fight either. Just promise me you'll be careful." By 8 o'clock, the coffee shop had become an impromptu headquarters. Madison Parker arrived with 3 other cheerleaders, all of whom had stories about Trevor and his crew. Alex, the junior who'd had his lunch money stolen, brought evidences, screenshots of Venmo requests from Marcus with threatening messages. Even some unexpected allies showed up, like Connor Walsh, a fellow football player who'd been disgusted by his teammates' behavior, but hadn't known how to speak up. "Trevor's been out of control for years," Connor said, his broad shoulders hunched with guilt. "Coach knows it, but he's our best quarterback. I should have said something sooner." Victoria interviewed each person carefully, building a comprehensive picture of systematic bullying and administrative negligence. Jasmine watched in amazement as their small rebellion grew into something larger, full investigation into the culture of Jefferson High. Then, at 9:15, Trevor Bennett himself walked into the coffee shop. The atmosphere immediately went electric. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Madison's hand found Jasmine's under the table, squeezing in solidarity. Connor stood up, positioning himself between Trevor and the group. Trevor looked different, smaller somehow. Without his usual swagger, his eyes were bloodshot, his perfect hair disheveled. He walked straight to Jasmine's table and, to everyone's shock, pulled out a chair and sat down. "I know you all hate me right now," he said, his voice hoarse, "and you have every right to, but I need you to hear something before this goes any further. You've got some nerve." Victoria started, but Jasmine held up a hand. "Let him talk," she said, studying Trevor's face. Something had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by what looked almost like fear. Trevor took a shaky breath. "My dad found out about the recording last night. He paused, running a hand through his hair. "He went ballistic, not because I did it, but because I got caught. Do you understand what I'm saying? He wasn't mad about the bullying. He was mad that I was sloppy about it." The confession hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Madison leaned forward. "Trevor, what are you trying to say?" "I'm saying that my whole life, I've been taught that people like us, people with money and connections, we're supposed to be in charge. We're supposed to keep people in line. My dad, my grandfather, that's how they built their empire, through intimidation and knowing that no one would challenge them." His voice cracked. "Last night, when I told him a black girl had outsmarted me, he said things that made me realize I don't want to be like him." Jasmine kept her expression neutral, but her mind was racing. Was this genuine remorse or another manipulation tactic? "So what do you want?" she asked directly. Trevor met her eyes. "I want to make a statement. On the record. About everything, the systematic bullying, the way the administration protects certain students, how my father uses his influence to cover up problems, all of it." The coffee shop erupted in whispers. Victoria's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard. "You realize what you're saying? You'd be implicating yourself. Your family?" "I know," Trevor said. "But I'm 18. I can make my own choices. And I choose not to be the person my father raised me to be. Not anymore." Connor sat back down slowly. "Dude, your dad will destroy you." "Probably," Trevor agreed with a bitter laugh. "He's already threatened to cut me off. Take away my car. My college fund. But you know what? I watched that recording of myself last night. Jasmine sent it to me. And I didn't recognize the person in it. That's not who I want to be." Jasmine studied him for a long moment. She'd learned to read people, a survival skill developed over years of navigating different schools and social hierarchies. What she saw in Trevor's eyes looked real: the pain, the confusion, the desperate need to break free from patterns he'd only just begun to recognize. "Okay," she said finally. "Victoria? Interview him." "But Trevor, understand this. If this is some kind of game, if you're trying to manipulate the situation, it's not," he said quickly. "I'll take a polygraph if you want. I'll sign sworn statements. Whatever it takes." The next hour was surreal. Trevor Bennett, golden boy of Jefferson High, systematically demolished his own reputation and that of his family. He detailed years of bullying incidents, naming names and providing dates. He explained how his father would make donations to the school whenever Trevor got in trouble, how the coaching staff looked the other way, how there was an unspoken understanding that certain students were untouchable. "The worst part," Trevor said, his voice barely above a whisper, "is that I enjoyed it. The power, making other people feel small, made me feel big." It took Jasmine standing up to me to realize how pathetic that is. By the time the interview finished, the coffee shop was packed. Word had spread through social media, and students had been arriving all morning. Mrs. Patterson had given up trying to run a normal business and was just keeping the coffee flowing, muttering about finally seeing some justice in this town. Victoria looked up from her laptop. "This is enough for 3 articles. Maybe 4. The Indianapolis Star wants it for their Sunday edition. That gives us 2 days to fact-check everything and get official responses. My dad's going to know within the hour," Trevor said. "He has people everywhere. I should probably go home and face the music." "What?" Jasmine said, surprising herself. "You don't have to do this alone. What you did today, it took courage. Real courage. Don't let him intimidate you into backing down." Trevor looked at her with something like wonder. "After everything I did to you, you're offering to help me? I'm offering to make sure your voice gets heard." Jasmine clarified, "Because your story is part of the bigger picture. Show people that even the bullies are victims of a toxic system." Madison spoke up. "My parents are lawyers. Good ones. They've been wanting to challenge the good old boys network in this town for years. Trevor, if your dad tries anything, legal or otherwise, call me." The group began to disperse, but the energy was electric. Something fundamental had shifted in the power dynamics of Jefferson High. As Jasmine walked out, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think you've won something? This town has ways of dealing with troublemakers. Watch your back." She showed it to Victoria, who immediately screenshotted it. "Document everything," Victoria said. "They're going to try to intimidate us, but we're not backing down." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. The story exploded beyond anything they'd imagined. The Indianapolis Star ran it on their front page with the headline, "Culture of Fear: How One Student's Courage Exposed Systematic Bullying in Small-Town Indiana." The recording went viral on social media, shared thousands of times with hashtags like #JeffersonStandsUp and #NoMoreBullying. The backlash was swift and vicious. Jasmine's mother received threatening phone calls at work. Someone spray-painted racial slurs on their garage door. Malik came home from school crying because kids were saying mean things about his sister. But for every attack, There was an overwhelming show of support. Community members organized to repaint their garage, turning it into a beautiful mural celebrating diversity. The hospital where Jasmine's mother worked issued a statement supporting their employee and condemning any attempts at intimidation. Students from neighboring schools started sharing their own stories, creating a wave of accountability across the region. Trevor bore the worst of it. His father kicked him out of the house, freezing his bank accounts and taking his car. But Connor Walsh's family took him in, and a GoFundMe for his college expenses raised $20,000 in the first day. The football team was divided, but more players sided with Connor and Trevor than anyone expected. The school board called an emergency meeting that packed the auditorium beyond capacity. Parents, students, and media filled every seat and lined the walls. Jasmine sat in the front row between her mother and Victoria, trying to ignore the cameras pointed at her. The superintendent, a gray-haired man named Dr. Dudova Morrison, tried to control the narrative. While we take all allegations of bullying seriously, we must be careful not to rush to judgment based on one-sided accounts. One-sided? A voice called from the crowd. It was Mrs. Chen, Victoria's mother. My daughter has documented 17 separate incidents over the past 3 years, all reported to the administration, all ignored. How is that one-sided? The crowd erupted in agreement. Parent after parent stood up with stories of their children being bullied, of complaints dismissed, of being told to let kids work it out themselves. The board members shifted uncomfortably as the evidence mounted. Then Marcus's mother stood up. Jasmine tensed, expecting an attack. But instead, the woman's voice was thick with tears. I failed my son, she said. I knew he was becoming someone cruel, but I told myself it was just teenage behavior. I let him become a monster because it was easier than admitting we had a problem. Miss Washington, I'm sorry. Thank you for having the courage to stop him before it was too late. The meeting lasted 4 hours. By the end, 3 board members had resigned. The superintendent had announced his retirement, and a comprehensive anti-bullying policy had been adopted. More importantly, a full investigation into the football program and its culture of protection for star players was launched. As people filed out, Trevor approached Jasmine one last time. He looked exhausted but somehow lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. I know I can never make up for what I did, he said. But I want you to know that testifying today, standing up to my father and his friend sits, the first time in my life I've felt like my own person. Thank you for that. Jasmine nodded. What will you do now? Community service, counseling, try to figure out who I am when I'm not being what my father wants. He managed a small smile. Maybe even apply to colleges based on my actual merits instead of my last name. Novel concept, right? As he walked away, Jasmine felt a complex mix of emotions. She'd never forgive him for the harassment, but she could respect the courage it took to burn down his own privilege. The weeks that followed brought significant changes to Jefferson High. A new principal was hired, Dr. Angela Roberts, a black woman with a reputation for transforming toxic school cultures. The football coach was replaced, and the team had to forfeit several games due to players being suspended. But morale actually improved under leadership that valued character over victories. Jasmine found herself thrust into a role she'd never wanted: the face of a movement. She received speaking invitations from schools across Indiana, requests for interviews from national media, and even a call from a publisher interested in her story. It was overwhelming, but her mother helped her navigate it with grace. Your father would be so proud, her mother said one evening as they sorted through mail. But more importantly, you should be proud of yourself. You didn't just stand up for yourself, you stood up for everyone who couldn't. The transformation wasn't just external. Jasmine found herself actually enjoying school for the first time since her father's death. She made real friends: Victoria, Madison, Connor, and others who'd stood with her. She joined the debate team, channeling her newfound confidence into competitive speaking. Her grades improved as she no longer spent energy avoiding bullies or nursing wounds from their attacks. One afternoon, she was studying in the library when Keisha approached her. "Hey, I wanted to thank you," the sophomore said shyly. "After you stood up to Trevor, I finally told someone about my stepbrother. He's been, well, it doesn't matter. What matters is I spoke up. And people listened. Because of you." Stories like Keisha's became common. The ripple effects of that day in the chemistry classroom spread far beyond Jefferson High. Schools across the state implemented new policies. Parents had difficult conversations with their children about privilege and power. Communities examined how they'd allowed toxic dynamics to flourish unchecked. 6 months later, Jasmine stood at a podium in the Indiana State House, testifying before the Education Committee about proposed anti-bullying legislation. The bill, informally known as Jasmine's Law, would require all schools to maintain transparent reporting systems for bullying incidents and mandate consequences for administrators who failed to act. As she spoke, she saw Trevor in the gallery. He'd been doing community service at a youth center, working with kids who reminded him of who he used to be. They'd developed an unlikely understanding, not friendship exactly, but mutual respect for the journey they'd both taken. Bullying thrives in silence. Jasmine told the committee, it depends on victims being too afraid to speak and bystanders being too comfortable to intervene. But when one person stands up, when they refuse to be silenced, it gives others permission to do the same. That's how change happens, one voice at a time, until it becomes a chorus too loud to ignore. The bill passed unanimously. As Jasmine left the State House, her phone buzzed with a message from her cousin in Chicago. "Saw you on C-SPAN. Dad would have been over the moon. You're carrying on his legacy in ways he never imagined." She smiled, thinking about how different her life had become. The quiet girl who just wanted to be left alone had become an advocate, a leader, a voice for change. It wasn't the path she'd chosen, but it was the one that had chosen her. That evening, there was a celebration at the coffee shop where it all began. Mrs. Patterson had decorated the place with banners reading, "Courage starts here," and "One voice can change everything." The place was packed with students, parents, and community members who'd been part of the journey. Victoria raised her coffee mug in a toast to Jasmine Washington, who reminded us that bullies are only as powerful as we allow them to be. To all of us, Jasmine corrected, looking around the room at the faces that had become so dear to her. Because change doesn't happen alone. It happens when we stand together. As the celebration continued around her, Jasmine stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The Indiana sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, and the air smelled like spring, like new beginnings. Her phone rang. It was her mother. "Baby, I just got off work. Save me some cake? Always." "Mom." "Oh, and Jasmine, I love you. Your dad would be so proud of the woman you've become." Jasmine smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "Thanks, Mom. Love you too." She took one last look at the sunset before heading back inside to her chosen family. The girl who'd been trapped in a classroom by bullies had become the young woman who'd changed an entire state's approach to protecting its students.